Welcome back. Panelists here. Democratic pollster Cornell Belcher, NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Hallie Jackson, Kimberly Atkins, the Chief Washington reporter and columnist for the Boston Herald, and David Brody, White House correspondent for the Christian Broadcasting Network. All right. David, I'm going to start with you. This is what Michael Gerson wrote. He says, as a political matter, however, the fight over Kennedy's replacement is a gift to the president. It is a reminder of Trump's adherence to the deal he made with evangelical Christians and other religiously conservative supporters. Ignore my bigotry and bad character, and all the kingdoms of the courts, from lowest to highest, will verily be yours. Pretty rough way to describe it. Michael Gerson's been very critical of evangelicals and their sort of blind support for the President Trump over character. But is he right?
Well, he's right to a degree, and the degree is this. Evangelicals voted for this president predominantly, especially the ones that were on the fence. I'm not talking about the ones that were showing up in Alabama in those rallies, but the ones that kind of came with their nose held to a degree. They voted for him for the Supreme Court, and here we are. And many of these evangelicals believe, and I know this is shocking to a lot of folks, but they believe he is God's chosen candidate for such a time as this. This is the word on the street in the evangelical world. And so along comes a second Supreme Court nomination, and they're like, well, here you go. We as an evangelicals have a chance to reshape this court for a long time. I think it'll be interesting to see in terms of reshaping the court, Murkowski and Collins. You know, everybody talks about the big Supreme Court fight to come. I think the fight's right now. The fight right now is how is this candidate going to be defined in terms of, in Trump's mind, how much Murkowski and Collins, potentially others, can get to this.
Well, it's interesting. We did a little research on the issue of abortion among Republican senators from when Kennedy was confirmed in 1988 to today. And in 1988, 10 Republican senators, Cornell, called themselves pro-choice in 1988 when Kennedy was confirmed. Today it's 2, the 2 that David just brought up there. Do you buy the idea that this will be the be-all, end-all on Roe?
It is, you know, it's the dog catching the car. Look, be careful what you ask for. And I've spent some time in focus groups across the country the last 2 weeks, right? Democrats will likely lose this battle, right? Because like you said, the numbers just aren't there, and there's only so many tactics you can take. Elections have consequences. But Chuck, I've been looking at Gallup data over the last 2 decades, and nowhere in this Gallup data do I show where anywhere approaching a majority of Americans think that abortion should be illegal. And God help these old men if they tick off these suburban women, and who've never really thought that their reproductive rights were at risk, and all of a sudden there is at risk, and it's real.
I thought Lindsey Graham was trying to send a message to the president when he said precedent matters.
It's settled law, right?
It was Lindsey's way of saying he didn't want the headline that said Lindsey Graham supports Roe v. Wade, so he used he started speaking in Latin, understandable political Latin here. But I think Lindsey Graham agrees with Cornell. Be careful here with Roe.
So the other piece of it, too, is that this is a president. I had heard from sources this week, and the president confirmed it on Friday. He is not going to specifically ask where these candidates are, where these potential picks are. He doesn't have to. They wouldn't be on this list coming out from the Federalist Society if you didn't already know where they stood on that particular issue. One way that I have heard that people close to the president are trying to inoculate against some of that is to push him toward picking a woman. And the president has said he is leaning towards selecting 2 women who are on this short list of maybe 5 to 7, including Amy Barrett, who was, as one person put it to me just last night, remember she was dinged by Dianne Feinstein in her confirmation hearing for the circuit judgeship. And so I think there is a calculation that some people close to the president are making, but I've also heard that the president himself has said, essentially, I'm going to try not to think about gender politics. I want to pick the best candidate, and if that's a man, it's a man.
You know, Kimberly, she's getting at something here, and I do think that each side is torn on this. Do they want the fight or not? Right? Do Republicans want this fight? I don't know. I think some of them do and think it's a worthy fight. And I think Democrats aren't sure if they want the fight, because if you have the fight too harshly, do you blow the red state Democratic senators, right?
I mean, I think at this point, Republicans aren't sure they need the fight. They think they've already won it. And I think the point that Cornell made aside, that this could backfire in the polls, I think they've already think that they won it. And for Democrats, the fight was in 2016. They missed the fight. That is when there was a Supreme Court justice being held up. But maybe because Merrick Garland wasn't the progressive firebrand that really stirred them up, or maybe they missed the fact that there was a path to Donald Trump to to 270. They didn't fight that fight then. Now it's too late, and they can only message the way we saw Senator Cantwell do as best as she could, but that's all Democrats have right now.
But one thing that strikes me so much, especially as somebody who covered the campaign in 2016, when you look at the exit polling data, and you can't talk about this enough, how much that Supreme Court opening was such a motivating factor for Republicans in particular.
Let me put
so
up the
than
quick.
Democrats.
You just led to a graphic we had already prepared, Hallie.
Well,
You
I didn't even know.
that. Among those, it was about 1 in 5 voters said the court was their number one issue. And take a look at what the percentage was. Among those voters, 56% were Trump voters, and only 41% were Clinton voters.
And that's the Democrats'
But that's the problem that Democrats have now. But you have groups like Demand Justice that are mobilizing now because all of a sudden they see that Supreme Court is in fact impossible, is important. I think you're going to see that number grow for Democrats.
Well, now that there's nothing that the Democrats could do to stop it. And look, you were talking about the support of evangelicals. Donald Trump is term limited. They have him at most for 8 years. Not just the Supreme Court, but the federal judiciary. It will take a full generation to turn around the court, the judiciary that's being shifted so far to the right.
And that's why this is a 40-year decision, is what we're talking about here. I would also say this, very important. Amy Barrett, Hallie, who you mentioned, evangelical sources tell me that's the number one pick for them, for sure, Amy Barrett. But beyond that, we know Donald Trump likes optics. Can you imagine Roe v. Wade, whatever it happens to be, of 5 men, 5-4 decisions on whatever it happens to be, Roe v. Wade or something along those lines. Look, this is an optics thing, and I think it would probably bode well for this president if he cares about optics, and yeah, he does, to possibly go with a woman here.
I don't know. I think back to when he was selecting his cabinet, for example. There was a lot of talk about optics then, and would he pick more women over these male candidates? And this is a president who doesn't like to be told how the optics make him look. He will assess that and think about it, but I'm not sure that in this instance that is the top motivating factor for him.
There is a political calculation here. Midterm elections come along. You got 3 months, July through November, to say, hey, I picked a Supreme Court nominee who's a woman, and I'm just saying, so listen to the fake news media out there saying I'm anti-woman. You know what? Fake news.
I think
it gives him a play.
I think it works for his base, but a woman who's going to overturn Roe v. Wade is going to terrorize those women in the suburbs.
All right, I have to leave it there. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.